Our world is changing rapidly. We can sense it, we can view it, we can see it. But let's take a look at a couple of adoptions of technology simply to make a point. And here we'll first take a look at the adoption of the telephone. If you look over the last 100 years, since the phone has been introduced into our world, you'll see an adoption curve that practically covers all of those 100 years. It took a long time for the telephone, the traditional telephone, the one that is attached to your wall, the landline, to be adopted. And if we were to look at the smartphone, something that was introduced 10 years ago in 2008, a little bit longer than that, but you'd see that there's a device there that is practically a computer that now has more adoption, significantly more adoption than the landline, the telephone, ever did. And that adoption was reached within 10 years. So we're now practically speaking, all walking around the world with a computer, a sophisticated, high capability when it comes to computing, when it comes to storage, when it comes to connectivity device that we all have within our pockets. So as you can see there, if you were to compare those two curves, you'd see a long one over the last 100 years, and you'd see one within the same graph near vertical. So we are accelerating in our adoption of technology. Our world is digitally transforming. And when it comes to our devices, our work, our place where we buy our groceries, the libraries that we go to, everywhere you look, digital transformation is taking place. Digital transformation is a term that is often used, but what do we mean by it? Let's take a quick example from our daily lives. From the moment you wake up in the morning, perhaps you turn on the radio, that's executing code. If you turn on the television, that's a smart application as well. If you were to turn on kitchen devices, the same thing is true. And not only is that true, the level of integration, connectivity, intelligence, processing power, storage is increasing in all of these devices. Now, as you turn on your vehicle, if you own a modern car, over 20 million lines of code are being executed. Pretty scary thought if you hadn't considered it before. Now, as you get to your place of work, the way through which you access in the building is digital access. You scan your card, you gain access. Now, as you go throughout your day, you are engaging with computers directly. This is how we carry out our world in our modern lives. Now, if you were to go to the grocery store in order to pay and exit, you'd have to go through a cash register. That is a computer as well. If you go to your doctor, this is how you are admitted. You have to register through a digital device. If you were to go to a grocery store, once again, throughout the day, the same thing would happen. And so as you can see there, we have an increasing number of touches with the digital world. Our infrastructure is now digital. We are digitally transforming. And if you think about additional touches within your world, it's hard to think of one where this hasn't been the case. Even our pets now have RFID chips, so in case they get lost, we can locate them. So as you can see there, our world is quickly digitally transforming. And what used to be the advantages of the leading technology companies is now a must-have for all of us living in our modern world. Digital transformation is something that we often hear about, but let's ground it with some examples. And perhaps one of the most romantic, much more hands to the ground type of examples is that of agriculture. We all have a picture that comes to mind when we think about agriculture, most likely something similar to what I'm thinking. This romantic notion of being out in the countryside, touching the soil with your hand, planting a seed, and waiting for that harvest. Well, it turns out that agriculture is one of the fastest digitally transforming areas there are, industries there is. And when it comes to that picture, that romantic notion that I just described to you, you can almost feel the warmth of the land, of the weather. It is very different than what I just described. Today's planting of seeds is done with a tractor that is fully automated and that is executing a script. It is moving throughout the field and planting the optimal seed density for every location. You can think of it as a jigsaw puzzle. It is split into all these different areas. For each area, you need to plant the optimal number of seeds. If you overseed, you hurt yield. If you underseed, obviously you do as well. Not only that, the depth that you plant that seed at is strategic. 1 inch difference can mean the difference between a successful harvest and being wiped out. So as you can see here, there are a number of companies that are aggregating this information, are selling their products to millions of acres throughout the world, integrating that information and guaranteeing yields to the farmers. So now being able to be successful in the world of agriculture means being able to do computation, means being able to gather data, means being able to derive insights for advantage in the marketplace when it comes to that data. So as you can see here, the romantic notion of agriculture is one that perhaps a few people do, but this is more of a hobby than the reality. Those that are playing the game for real at high scale have to take advantage of technology, just like many other industries. Let me give you a more grounded example. When it comes to American football, the National Football League, the NFL, you have here a digital transformation in progress. Every new shoulder pad that is issued to a player comes with a chip embedded in it. That is an RFID chip, the proverbial chip on your shoulder. And these stadiums around the country have been outfitted with the technology to be able to collect data from the players. Every single movement that is done on the field is now being recorded. All of that information is started to be gathered by the teams. And because of it, now you see professional sports organizations coming to places like MIT looking for technical talent. They need to be able to derive insights from this information. Now, it's early on. The low-hanging fruit is barely being grasped at, but you can see there a tremendous future coming, especially in a sport where there are 40 seconds in between each play. It naturally lends itself to be able to perform on-the-field analysis, to be able to get a better understanding of what's taking place, as opposed to doing it, as in most sports, after the game, studying game films, trying to discern the strategy that was used against you. There's an opportunity now to be able to pick up that data in play and make better decisions. Now, the parallel here to business is a pretty clear one. If you're implementing a strategy, if you're deploying a new product, you want to be able to instrument the world or derive from it data that can give you some insights as to how good of a decision you have made, or how good of a strategy, or how that strategy is playing out. In this case, you want to be able to do that in order to make course corrections. So as opposed to waiting a year or two and seeing how the market responds, you can deploy and observe and adjust. So very much like in the field of sports. And in the field of sports, you already have the professional, the coach, who has been let go because he does not understand how to use analytics to improve their team's performance. And you have the opposite as well. The new coaching staff with a team that has been hired for their insights and their ability to use data. Now, the same thing is coming to industry as well. Another field that is digitally transforming is that of education. Throughout hundreds of years, our packaging and our structure has been the same. You go to a classroom, you sit there for an hour, you have a number of classes that you take, and you finish degrees or certifications. Now the world is digitally transforming, and you're getting many more granularities. You're getting many different types of offerings, from online to hybrid to course marketplaces to certifications directly from the technology vendors to universities providing executive education, professional education. And so this is a world that is much more appealing, that has many more modalities, and that is far from being saturated. Educational technology is one of our greatest opportunities. We're digitally transforming, and our workforces need to learn at a faster pace. Our previous model was like signing up to a gym and exercising for a number of years and then just assuming that you would be fit for the rest of your life. Now, that doesn't make any sense. However, until recently, this is how we have carried out our higher education. You go to a place, you work out for 4 years, you take your classes, you learn, and then for the rest of your life, you are a person that is knowledgeable. Well, it doesn't turn out that way. In physical life, it doesn't turn out that way when it comes to your brain. So you have to continue to evolve, continue to grow. And this is an opportunity that we now have given the great number of offerings, new offerings, and the richness of the evolving environment when it comes to educational technology. We often hear about digital transformation. We see it in the press, we hear about it in talks, but what do we mean by it? I'll go ahead and ground it here in 5 pillars. That's the Internet of Things, cloud, artificial intelligence, security, and blockchain. And I'll start off by diving a little bit deeper with the Internet of Things devices, IoT. I have about 50 or so devices, a lot of them connected to my home router. And every new generation of devices has more connectivity, has more computational power. It is a clear trend. Perhaps you have some of them as well. No doubt you might have a computer that is connected. Perhaps you have some electronic readers. You might have your television that is integrated as well. But there are many others that are coming. And that really is the beginnings of the big explosion when it comes to connectivity and devices that would allow us to better manage our resources. When it comes to industry, we'll have already begun this transformation as well, especially in the operations technology side of organizations. Now, all of this takes us to our second pillar, and we have a great deal of data coming out of IoT. We need a place to store it. And when it comes to the cloud, we have near infinite storage and processing capability. Throughout the 2000s, the leading tech companies developed this capability. And even if all you were to use was processing and storage, they can still do it at a cheaper cost than you. They're distributed throughout the world and have great capabilities. However, cloud is a great deal more. Really is the engine for business today. It is your opportunity to digitally transform. It is the number of resources that you can use to gain a business advantage. It is much more costly for you to develop a data practice and run all of the software that you need inside of your organization than to leverage the offerings that the cloud already has. And this takes us to our third pillar, artificial intelligence. The commercial clouds, as I mentioned, are much more than cloud storage and computation. They really offer a set of services that can give you a great advantage. When it comes to artificial intelligence, the leading clouds, Azure, Amazon AWS, Google GCP, all of them have rich offerings when it comes to artificial intelligence. And today, you can take these algorithms off the shelf and readily apply them to your needs within your organization or company. I'll give you here a clear and simple example. If you were to be a restaurant owner, one of the things that you watch out for is bad reviews. This is something that can really hurt your business. And watching the place where these reviews are posted can be tiresome, plus they're not just posted in one place, they're posted in many. Now, a simple thing to do is to have a page scraper that goes and downloads all of that text. You can automatically feed that into a sentiment analysis algorithm that, again, is off the shelf. You do not need to write. And once that processing is done, if there's a high negative sentiment, you can be notified of this occurrence. Now, doing all of that I just described is something that you can do in well under an hour, even if you are a novice. So you can see there how the abstraction has risen and that our ability to be able to use these tools in the cloud is something that is much more accessible now. This is why the degree of automation is increasing in the world, and it is something that we sorely need given the demands of our digital world and the pace that we're moving at now. Now, I talked about IoT, cloud, and AI. Now I'll mention security. Our world is now on top of a digital infrastructure. And if we do not have security, we do not have anything. Now, when it comes to the threat that is out there, Hollywood will paint to you the picture of this rough-looking hacker that is a phenomenon when it comes to the type of intelligence that he has, that he is a malcontent, that he is angry with the world. Well, the reality is quite different. We have cybercrime organizations, companies that are well-funded, well-organized, that have good talent, that have creativity and innovation. And they are creating products just like you are, or the world is, and launching these products against the world, which means that this is a persistent threat. This is not going away anytime soon, which means that we have to adjust to this new reality. It means that we need to be able to address the basics when it comes to security. We need to address all of those patterns that have been captured within frameworks and that are well known to exist out in the world. Now, that addresses most of our threat. It certainly lowers the noise when it comes to the types of attacks that you're going to see. And in addition to that, you need to prepare for the unknown. This is the zero-day attack, the attack for which there is no known way to block it because you don't even know what it is. Now, when it comes to this, there are other practices that can give you more robustness, resiliency. Some of these are chaos engineering, and there's many others that you can use as well. Now, the last one that I'll mention here is blockchain. All of the architectures that I have mentioned up until this point have been hierarchical. You can compromise them at one point. Now, when it comes to blockchain, this is quite different. This is a peer-to-peer network throughout the world. It doesn't matter if a country bans it or makes it illegal. A couple of them have tried. China did it, then India tried it for a while. As long as other individuals around the world want to participate, or even individuals in their own countries, as long as they are connecting and are transacting with the rest of the network, then this blockchain will continue to run. Now, there are a lot of technical aspects to blockchain. However, I'll give you a simple way to think about it. Think about it as an open record, like a Google Doc that anybody can write to. Think about it as a chain of transactions you can follow to determine how much everybody has. Think about it as a decentralized data network. That means we all have a copy of the data on this network. And then the fifth one, think of it as having a mechanism through which new data can be added. In this case, the technology is referred to as consensus mechanisms. Now, in addition to that, there are three properties that I would like to call out. And the very first one is identity, the second one is cryptocurrencies, and the third one is logic, which is often called smart contracts. As opposed to your traditional banking institution or even your country, getting an identity is free. You can create one or you can create millions. And the next thing that you can do is you can pair it with cryptocurrency. So in a couple of steps that are as accessible as accessing your favorite newspaper in a browser, you can pair cryptocurrency and identity and start to transact throughout the world. So as opposed of bringing the unbanked and the underbanked to banks, in this case, you can make them banks just with those two properties. Now, the third one is adding some logic. And as you can see there, if you bring all three of them together, you can start to create some pretty sophisticated products. So as you can see there, decentralized finance, fintech, all of those are grasping, experimenting, launching new companies, trying to exploit some of those properties. This is sorely needed given the legacy and amount of friction that has existed in a lot of the banking networks throughout the world of our digital infrastructure that supported finance and money movements throughout the world. So as you can see there, these are the 5 pillars of digital transformation. There are more, but these are some of the most important ones, the ones that we would like to call out. First, you have IoT, then cloud, then artificial intelligence, security, and blockchain. If you put your arms around these, you will get a good grasp of what digital transformation is. When it comes to digital transformation, many organizations are curious about where they are lagging. How do they measure themselves to the leading technology companies? And I'll mention here a few topics that I often see when I work with organizations. The very first one is cybersecurity. This is something that wasn't as important in the past. We weren't as connected as we are today, especially when it comes to the world of devices. A lot of them were not connected. However, there's a clear advantage in having more connectivity and having more access to data. That means that you need to be a lot more serious and rigorous when it comes to your cybersecurity practice. You need to start off with an assessment and go from there to develop the capabilities that are needed. Now, the second one, and that derives from the first, is data. Our world is quickly transforming and it is producing a tremendous amount of data. How do we gather all this information and be able to derive insights from it is a tremendously important mission within your company. You need to be able to collect, to store, to extract, transform, and load all of this data, and then to be able to process that with analytical engines and finally to make it accessible throughout your organization. Now, going through that journey is something that requires a number of years. If you use the cloud, you will be faster when it comes to your tools. However, you still need to have that great mixture of people, technology, and processes. You need to transform to be able to do this as well. Now, the next topic that I'll mention is cloud, and that connects to the first two, cybersecurity and data. When it comes to the cloud, this is your resource to be able to digitally transform in a much more expedient way, to avoid reinventing the wheel. Everything from having a data center, which you shouldn't do today, given how much better and lower cost a commercial public cloud can do it, to all of the other rich offerings that the cloud has when it comes to service. So when it comes to cybersecurity, the future is in the cloud. Cybersecurity professionals know it, and they are adjusting as well. When it comes to data and being able to establish a data practice, the future is in the cloud. Professionals know that as well. So the cloud is something that you should invest in heavily and start moving there in as much as you can. You can start experimenting simply with the lift and shift, just moving over a bunch of your capabilities. Often people refer to that as your mess for less, and start on that journey. Now, the fourth bullet that I'll mention here has to do with automation. Everything that I've mentioned is moving towards higher integration, more automation, less people touching your systems. Google has a funny saying that says, if you have a human involved in a loop, then you have a bug. And this is why we want to move to as much automation as possible. Our world is changing rapidly, and the amount of data that we have to make decisions on is simply too much for us to handle as humans. It doesn't mean that jobs will go away, they will simply shift. In this case, the higher automation you have, the better off you will be when it comes to being able to compete, when it comes to being able to have more speed and more agility. Now, the last one that I'll mention is that of an advisor. The world is rapidly changing, and every 18 months or so, you have new technologies that are causing disruptions, that are causing cost deflation, that are transforming business processes. And having somebody to advise you and to keep you in touch, even if you have a digital officer, is something that is tremendously important. It is something that you see in many of the leading boards today. And so don't disregard this last point. It is part of your efforts to keep current. It is part of your efforts to maximize your use of technology. Digital transformation technologies give us tremendous advantages and possibilities. However, before you can make use of them, you need to be able to transform your workforces. Part of this is education. We're currently working with many companies in trying to achieve this big transformation. And when we're working with these companies, we're not working to transform just the technology leaders, the 5% or 10% of the company that is providing that infrastructure, that is building those resources. We're actually working in programs to transform 80% of the organization. Fortunately, today, the degree of abstraction when it comes to technologies has risen at a pretty high level. Not only that, they keep on rising, which means that at every new generation of technology, it is easier to use the technologies without having to be a technologist. Artificial intelligence is a great example of this. You do not have to be an expert to start to use it. So we're trying to provide those capabilities, which means transforming often thousands of people in order to provide them with this new capability. Luckily, as I mentioned, the tools have matured enough that it is even simpler today to use than using an Excel spreadsheet, which means that this is much more accessible. And if you have not done so already, this is something that you need to do. You need to invest in the transformation of your employers. Ultimately, when it comes to technology, what is often said continues to be true. You need to have the talent, and for that, you need to be able to compete on a global scale. When it comes to those individuals that know how to work with these new technologies, you need to have the technology in place as well. The leading vendors are the ones in the cloud, the public clouds. So here it's Amazon AWS, it's Microsoft Azure, or Google Cloud Computing. They're all pretty much the same. There are some advantages depending on what you're trying to use, but these are great choices as well. Now the last one is processes. What you do will not change. How you do it will change. In this case here, there are titles that will go away due to the automation of the cloud. There will be things that require different types of expertise, which you will have to hire for. So you need to start on this transformation right away because the marketplace is certainly not waiting. You want to achieve that speed, agility, and to be able to maximize the benefits that you get from technology.